Good evening, everyone. I want to say a great gratitude to Andre and the team for inviting me to be part of the Ignite and Revive Festival. I don't take it lightly, and it's an honor and a privilege to be up here today. I just want to play a quick intro video before I get started. Thank you. Please forgive me for not speaking Afrikaans with a surname like Labuschagne. My ancestors were part of the French Huguenots, who, due to religious persecution, fled France and settled in the Cape between 1688 and 1691. In 1913, my great-grandfather trekked from Daar in the Northern Cape to a little place called West Nicholson in southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And that's where my life started, from humble beginnings as a fourth-generation Zimbabwean in a cattle ranching background. I'm going to start off today by sharing a little bit of my life before prison, the incident, the hardships I endured during my time in prison, mixed in with a few life lessons. Then the main life lessons I learned in prison, followed by my journey from prison until now, and how the Lord has worked in my life to bring me from a rebel to one of Jesus' soldiers. I want you to know two things before we get started. The first is that I'm innocent, and I want to reiterate that. I was ripped from my life and loved ones for years and spent a decade in prison. The second thing I want you to know is that I'm not free because I'm no longer incarcerated. My freedom means a lot more than that. It is a deeper freedom. And it is my road to this freedom that I want to share with you today. So let me highlight the contrast of my life before I got sent to prison. I was living the good life. I worked hard, played hard, and was an avid sportsman, playing several rugby tests for Zimbabwe too. I lived what you might call a very successful life with numerous thriving businesses. I was so busy being successful, though, that after 14 years, my marriage fell apart. And I no longer lived under the same roof as my beloved children. I missed them terribly. But through making the right business decisions, by the year 2000, life couldn't have been better for this farm boy who grew up dirt poor. I was extremely happy, making plenty of money in my safari business. I was flying my own aircraft, had a fishing resort on the shores of beautiful Lake Kariba in Zimbabwe, flashy cars, houseboats, speedboats, you name it. And to top it off, I was engaged to a beautiful woman. Then in an instant, my world was turned upside down. It all started one weekend in December 2000 when I went on a fishing trip with friends to my fishing resort on Lake Kariba. Late one afternoon, one of my mates and I decided to go tiger fishing on the lake, leaving the other guys bream fishing in the river. And on our way back, we spotted two fish poachers in a steel boat, who immediately upon seeing us, started paddling hastily for the shore in an effort to get away from us. Knowing they were notorious poachers, I drove my boat towards them to scare them off, and the wake of my boat tilted their boat, causing them to jump out into the water, which was about 1.5 meters deep, and they were about 3 meters from the shore. They soon scrambled to dry land, and my friend and I then watched as they ran away into the bush and thought nothing more of it. The following day, the police arrived with one of the poachers and accused us of drowning the other one. To cut a long story short, I was framed by the poacher, the police, and the courts in an ugly, politically influenced conspiracy and sentenced to 15 years in Zimbabwe's prisons, of which 5 were removed as remission. Unbelievably, my co-accused only got a $10 fine and was set free because he was not driving the boat. That's exactly as it was stated in the judgment. On the 3rd of April 2003, during the height of the land invasion chaos in Zimbabwe, against police evidence, without a body and on presumptions, I was convicted of drowning that poacher. The shock was inexpressible. I was innocent. I was a successful, self-made businessman with a high standing in the community. You can only imagine what was going through my mind when I read out that verdict. But what I didn't know then was from that moment on, my life would never be the same again. For my first 8 years, only one set of clothing was allowed at any one time: a standard white short-sleeve shirt and a pair of drawstring white shorts. Underwear was forbidden. After 6 months, you got a change of clothing. Sometimes. Other times after 9 months, leaving us walking around in tatters. I shared a cell 13 meters long by 3 meters wide with 78 other inmates. Each person had 33 centimeters, 13 inches, marked out on the walls in chalk. That was your space. The toilet was a stainless steel bowl sunk into an open 1 meter square cement block in one corner, as you can see in my sketch up there. We were packed like sardines on our sides, with legs all crossing over in the middle. And we all faced the same direction. When you turned over, it was all together. As cushioning against the cold concrete floor, you'd fold 2 of your paper-thin, worn-out, lice-ridden blankets several times to fit your space, then covered yourself with a third one. And your clothes were wrapped around your toothbrush and toothpaste, or they'd get stolen, and that was your pillow. From sleeping on those freezing hard floors, my hips had bruised black rings for years, and shoulders ached continuously. Those floors are cold and hard, and not even the breath you take is your own. The back of someone's head is there, and you can feel breathing on the back of your neck. You're packed so close together that what someone else exhales, you inhale. Can anything be further removed from freedom than that? And yet physical freedom is one thing. You can deal with it. We all can. By living in the moment to survive. But freedom of the mind and soul, that is something else. That is true freedom. That imprisoned my body, but I refused to let them imprison my mind. During those lonely long years, I'd watch the pigeons day after day. After they'd eaten the pieces of pup off the exercise yard floor, they'd fly over those high razor-wire topped walls. And I wished 1,000,000 times that I could somehow just fly away with them and be free again. And I don't believe there's a prisoner that doesn't think that, because it is the only glimpse of freedom you get to see in there. It's just cold walls, bars, and razor wire. No furniture whatsoever. No beds, no tables, no chairs, no cupboards, nothing. Not even a mirror. Didn't see my face for the first 8 years. It's just rows of filthy folded blankets and hundreds of well-used water bottles on bare concrete floors. Like a newly built hotel, completely unfurnished. For the first 8 years, the worst thing to deal with were the lice. Thousands of them that never went away, ever. They would crawl and bite day and night, leaving itchy, weeping blisters. And because they never stopped, they were draining, but mentally and physically. And there's nothing you can do about it. But I tried. We all did. We spent hours killing them, as you can see in my sketch there. We had no basins or taps in the cells, and only one set of clothing was allowed at any one time. So we had to wash our clothes in the cell toilets at night wearing a blanket. Then hang them on the walls with smuggled book staples to dry by the next morning. 3 or 4 of us would get together and take turns to wash our clothes, because one garment had to be used to block the toilet to allow the toilet bowl to fill up when attempting to flush. No toilets flushed in any prison toilet. The water only ever dribbled in slowly. Then we'd wash the clothes on the cement blocks surrounding the toilet bowl, dipping them in and out as we washed, as you can see in my sketch there. At about 5 a.m., we'd take the slightly damp clothes, place them on a cleanly swept concrete floor, and rub the creases out with a prison-made sponge. Then fold them neatly, place them in a pile, put a hand towel over the pile, and stamp on it hard with bare feet, leaving them perfectly ironed. Another hour hanging on the walls, they'd be ready to wear. Imagine wearing the clothes you're wearing now for 6 months without a change. Then to retain your dignity, having to wash them in a well-used toilet. The humiliation was beyond comprehension. That is Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison in Harare, and the red circle indicates my hall for 4.5 years in the prime of my life. I was transferred to Chikurubi after exactly 1 year in Kami Maximum Security Prison outside Bulawayo. In 2005, Harare city ran out of water. For 3 years, while in Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison, each prisoner was allocated only 1 plastic cup of water a day. 1 cup of dirty orange city runoff water from a nearby dam, carried by farm prisoners. That was to drink, clean your teeth, wash your face, bath, everything, for 3 years. That's us sitting in formation, waiting for our 1 cup a day. I've learned that the most important things in life cannot be bought. Health, loved ones, and friends. In that order. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." I had every reason to have a crushed spirit. During my first 6 years in prison, I watched over 2,200 people die in prison, primarily from malnutrition. It was during the Zimbabwe dollar crash when there was no food outside of prison, never mind in there. After being moved to a medium security prison during the cholera outbreak of 2008 and 2009, in 8 months, out of 1,200 of us prisoners at Harare Central Prison, 432 guys died. More than 1/3 of us in 8 months. 1 weekend, 22 guys died. And that triggered something inside me about my health. And I want to challenge every one of you here today to do a rain check on your health. Because once your health is gone, everything else in your life will have no meaning whatsoever. Loved ones, Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. In my case, it was my precious sister. In June 2006, the prisoner death rate was so high from malnutrition and disease that prison headquarters started allowing relatives to deliver food to their loved ones daily. And my darling sisters, Bev and Lynn, fed me for 3 months, selling furniture and scraping money from wherever, until Lynn sold her clay pot business and gave up her career just to feed me for 4 more years. That takes a very special person. And I can honestly say that without her, I wouldn't be standing up here today. She was married, she had 2 kids, she sold her business and gave up everything just to feed her boat for 4 years. And unfortunately, very few relatives could financially afford to feed their loved one daily. And I helped as many guys as I could afford to, but the hunger continued for most. But friends, family, love and support sustained me as much as the warm home-cooked food they brought. And friends, Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. There is a special unwritten code that bonds friends like we all share in this part of the world. The warm, caring, and considerate society we make up from all walks of life can never be equaled anywhere. I shared treasured memories with thousands of good people in Africa. And it was those memories and the endless generosity, consideration, and knowing what a fantastic bunch of people we still have left here that kept me going all those years in hell. Knowing that one day I'd be traveling around reminding people, including you here today, never to forget the value of your friends. Because only when you have them all taken away do you realize how much they mean to you. What I've shared with you so far is probably about 3% of my story. The rest you can find in my book, Beating Chains, which I got the former Springbok rugby coach, Ian McIntosh. He did the forward for me. He grew up with my dad and followed my rugby all the way through. But I want you all to go back 10 years in your life. So think about where you were 10 years ago. Now think about how much you've accomplished in the last 10 years. That's what a big chunk I had taken away. But even in the depth of such horrendous experiences, I knew I had ultimate control of how I chose to feel and respond. Behind every severity lies an opportunity. And that experience gave me the opportunity to get to know hidden attributes about myself and time to consider some really important things in life. My life in chains taught me many lessons, and that's what I'd like to share with you now. How my faith and mental strength got me through there. Romans 8:35, can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or threatened with death? The Lord didn't say we wouldn't have trials and tribulations. He said he'd walk with us through those trials and tribulations. After being moved to a medium security prison while delivering food one day, my sister asked me if I would like an iPod. So I said to her, what's an iPod? She said, it's a thing that plays music. So I said, well, how big is it? That's a true story. She indicated this small, flat little thing. So I said, well, how many songs does it play? She said, about 1,000. I said, no ways. Where do you put all the CDs? And that's how much technology had advanced in just 6 years. 6 years I've been away. From 2.3 until 2.9, I mean, it was a whole different world in the technology. Anyway, the following day, the iPod arrived under the salad. And about a week later, one of those cheap Nokia cell phones was sneaked in too with a rechargeable battery. And everything was going perfectly until an envious prisoner reported me. It was exciting, risky business that you couldn't dream of in a maximum security prison. This was a medium security prison. Anyway, after an unexpected search, unbelievably through some quick maneuvering with on-site guards, nothing was discovered. But I was sent to solitary confinement anyway for 2 years. That was extremely lonely. But after experiencing that precious little link to the outside world, I had to get my phone back, and I did, which made a huge difference. 18 months later, everything going perfectly, one of the friendly guards approached my style at 5 in the morning and whispered, Russ, they're coming for your phone. And there's no way of getting a phone out of there. But someone had brought me a protein powder about a month before, and I'd never seen it before, and had to go through the doctor and security, big story to get it in. And when I got it, I opened it, broke the seal, tasted it, and when I put the seal back and closed it, the next time I opened that seal, it stuck. So I saved it to hide my phone. So that morning I opened it, broke the seal, took half the powder out, wrapped the phone in plastic. The iPod was with a mate of mine. Put the powder back, put the seal. 6 o'clock, the guards arrive. And what they do is they make you strip naked. Then you got to jump with your legs open like you're hiding something. Then you all walk out stark naked into the courtyard, 1,200 guys, and they do the search. You know, after the search, I come back into my cell and everything is upside down everywhere, but my protein powder still in good shape. 5 minutes later, I'm summoned to the security office. So I walk in there, there are 4 guards standing, one seated behind a big, long desk. He was sitting there, and there was an empty chair. I hadn't sat in a chair for 7.5 years. He says, take a seat. So I sat down, felt good. He said, do you have a girlfriend called Karen? So I said, no. I said, I've done before prison called Karen. He said, okay. When did you last talk to her? I said, long ago, before prison. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah. They handed me a letter addressed to me from Karen. So now talking to her on the phone the other night, you sound so positive. After some intense questioning, this story just came to me, and I said, no, Karen was having lunch in Bulawayo, and she met a lady there, and they started chatting, and soon realized that they both had boyfriends in the same prison. So the lady said, let me call my boyfriend, who's a guard in there. He can call Russ, and you guys can have a chat. So I used the guard's phone. Hey, Zimbabwe Oaks, I've got a plan. But after I couldn't tell them what the guard's name was, they didn't buy it. An hour later, I'm escorted up to the officer in charge's office. When you go up there, it's big trouble. And they were waiting, like 15 big brass officers all standing in a half circle, officer in charge behind his big desk, and my empty chair in the middle. He said, take a seat. So I sat down. He said, if you don't tell me what that guard's name is, your life in this prison is going to change. And him and I got on really well. And I said, well, officer, I don't know his name. And then the question started. How tall was he? How old? What rank? Where did you make the call? How long ago did you make the call? And I answered as best I could. And then the head of the soccer, a very nice officer, he said, do you want to talk to the officer in charge on your own? So I said, yes, please. So they all leave. I closed the door. I said, officer, we've both been through hell. We've watched hundreds of guys die. I've donated endless stuff to the prison service. I said, can't you just let this one go? He said, Russ, I don't care about you, but I want the guard's name now. He was furious. So I said, well, I don't know his name. He said, okay. He calls the officers. He said, put him on death row in the dark cell. Sorry, I jumped one there. That was the solitary confinement one. I'm getting too involved not watching my slides. So that's what the solitary confinement cell is. You lie on the concrete floor. Anyway, they escorted me over to the condemned section. They used to hang guys in those days. And there were 56 cells, and 52 had guys waiting to be hung. And of the 4 that were remaining, one is called the dark cell. So the cells are exactly the same as solitary confinement. So they were 3 meters by 1 meter by 3 meters, and no window, just a vent. And the dark cell had a staircase built over the vent. So it was pitch black, and the electric light didn't work. And they used to put guys in there to break them. Anyway, they made me strip naked, gave me 3 worn-out lice-ridden blankets, a 5-liter container cut off at the top as a toilet, same as solitary, and a liter of water. They locked me in there for 23 hours and 45 minutes a day. So I was allowed out 5 minutes in the morning to clean my teeth, 5 minutes at 10 o'clock to have a shower, 5 minutes at 3 o'clock to prepare for lockup. It was cold, lonely, and dark, like being buried alive. I couldn't even see my hand. Desperate, on day 6, I got on my knees and I prayed. And I'll never forget the feeling of like warm water being poured over me and a total sense of calmness. So I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. Within 30 minutes, I faintly heard my Afrikaans mate shouting from the soccer ground, "Hey, Ras, everything's okay, my mate. Don't worry, everything's okay." So I jumped up. I said, "Hey, fool." I said, "Don't worry, Ras, everything's okay." So I said, "Okay." Lay down on the concrete, looking up at the darkness. Within 10 minutes, they unlocked my door. And the sound of those locks goes right through you. Chucked me in my clothes. Said, "The officer in charge wants to see you." So I get dressed, go out into the blinding sun, across the courtyard, up the stairs to his office. His exact words were, he said, "Hello, Russ." I said, "Hello, officer." He said, "Have you remembered the guy's name yet?" I said, "No, officer." He said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it in God's hands. You can go back to your cell." And at the exact moment when I was praying, my sister was paying him $200 to get me out of there. That was a big turning point in my spiritual walk. And I'm happy to say that Jesus is everything in my life today. I've learned not to let past thoughts hurt me. The past only exists in your head. It can only come to life if you let it. Jesus said in Matthew 6:27, 6:27, "Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" I was forced to live in the moment in prison, and it's one of the biggest lessons I still practice today. That's a picture of me in Harare Central Prison in 2010, 18 months after the cholera outbreak ended. I found it on the internet. It was a sad, lonely time in my life, but all part of God's plan. And to be able to find positives in all the negatives going on around me brought hope, which is a huge part of getting through prison life. If you had to ask me for one word that carried me through prison, it was hope. Hope enabled me to see that there is light despite all the darkness. Let your hopes, not your troubles, shape your future. I'll say that again. Let your hopes, not your troubles, shape your future. And never look for hope outside of yourself. To find it, you need to look within. We're made in the image of God, and the answers are in us. If you'd said to me in year 1, you're going home in year 3, I would have said never. I'm going home now. Like 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks I could live with. Anything beyond that was too painful. I counseled myself on how to think through the physical impact my thoughts had on me. If I thought about my fiancée with another oak, or my mates on fishing trips or trips to Vegas we went every year for marketing, it was too painful. So I'd block those out until that hope returned. And to be able to find happiness in even the smallest things that happen in prison kept me healthy. Those who couldn't died. Life in prison or in Las Vegas, still just life. It's what you make of it, no matter where you are. I had everything I could ever wish for, and in moments, it was all gone. Why you should forgive. James 1, verse 19 and 20. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to be angry. For a man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. Many of us walk around angry and bitter because of unforgiveness. The humiliation of being labeled a murderer in terrible conditions were extremely hard to deal with. As was the pain of my bitterness, anger, hatred, frustration, and revenge for what they'd done and were doing to me. I hated them bitterly. And initially, would lie there for hours, wishing every terrible thing on each of them in turn, the poacher, the police, the judge, the ministry, and all who were involved in my conviction. Then one day, I was struck by the realization that they'd all forgotten about me long ago. Here I was, consumed by the unfairness of it all, and they, blissfully unaware of the evil I wished on them every day. In the end, I was only hurting myself. I was carrying all that in my head and beating myself up for nothing. The single biggest lesson I learned in prison was true forgiveness. And for me, it was bigger than anything I could have achieved on my own. True forgiveness was inspired by God Almighty. And so I was letting go. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. And I learned to live in the moment from then on. The past was too painful, and the future full of unkept promises. So I just dealt with each day as it was. I learned to have faith, because no amount of worrying was going to change what I was going through. If you have anger or resentment towards anyone in any way, it will eventually destroy you. Because that is what those emotions do. They steal from you. They steal happiness and freedom. Many people ask me how I managed to forgive them for what they did to me. I remember the exact moment, walking in that exercise yard after about a year, and I was tired of all the anger, hatred, and bitterness that was draining me daily. And I remember looking up and I just said, Lord, take care of them and let me get through this road that's been put in front of me. What goes around comes around, they'll get to their deserve. And once I'd accepted that, my life in prison changed. And the incredible thing for me was it wasn't a gradual process. It was an instant mindset shift. It was like I had this secret for years that I was hiding from the oaks, and so scared it was going to get out. And one day I just told the oaks, it was out, gone. I was free. Forgiveness doesn't change the person that hurt you. Forgiveness changes you. You can look at it in two ways. You can forgive, forget, and move forward, or you can retain, remember, and regret. The choice is yours. And if you say, I'll forgive, but I'll never forget, then you still remember and will never move forward. And I don't mean forget the lessons learned from the incident. Just don't revisit the incident. Don't revisit the pain. You can't bounce back from anything unless you forgive those who you believe have done you wrong. And only when you forgive and let go of the past can you be fully free to move forward with your full potential. Why you should be grateful. Jesus said in Matthew 16:26, and what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? We all want too much in our lives, concentrating on what we haven't got instead of being grateful for what we have. And for me, giving thanks to God every day goes a long way. For my health, a beautiful wife, lovely home, a soft bed, running water, and so on. When there's no food, no water, and people are dying all around you, you become grateful for the fact that you're still breathing. And another day is a blessing. When you lie in a cell with 78 other people, and your breath is not even your own. Gratitude has a different meaning altogether. Accepting that what I went through cannot be changed and be grateful for it taught me has unlocked my vision for my future. The healthiest of all human emotions is gratitude. Remember that and practice it. Having an attitude of gratitude is one of the most impactful habits for a fulfilling and healthy life. I want to take you back to the year 2000, the year the incident took place. If you have a look at the picture up there on the top left, on the far left there, is a billionaire from Pittsburgh, Ray Anthony, who's a client of mine. We're flying in his private jet from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa, Florida, where we collected General Norman Schwarzkopf, the gentleman on the right of that photo next to me. He was the officer commanding of the United States Armed Forces during the Gulf War, the most powerful man in the world at the time. We were flying to Reno, Nevada to attend the Safari Club International Convention together. It was a huge honor. The top right-hand picture on the left of that is Glenn Dubin. On the right, Louis Bacon, two billionaires from New York that I spent many wonderful times on safari with. The bottom left, I'm in a V8 Ferrari, which was my car in Miami for a month. Bottom right, on a private yacht in Fort Lauderdale. My life back then was all about flashy cars, private yachts, mixing with billionaires. I thought I was invincible, flying high, thinking I was bulletproof. Unbeknown to me, my life was being controlled by ego, power, and money. Satan had sunk his claws deep into my soul, and I didn't even know it. I was as far away from God as I could get. Don't get lost in that false world too. The only place you'll find peace is with Jesus. Not another flashy car, another houseboat, or another million. Going further back in my life, I was a wild teenager, make no mistake. Drinking, fighting, poaching, anything that pushed the boundaries of the law was fun. During the Rhodesian Bush War, it was a wild era and we lived life to the full, never considering the consequences. But had I known during all those years what I know now, life would have been very different. You don't want to know what else I went through in prison. I had to fight for my life on many occasions. And it was by the grace of God that I came out alive. Thousands didn't. With all due respect, be very careful what path you choose to follow in this world today. Don't get mixed up with the wrong people and start pushing the boundaries of the law, because you don't want to go where I've been. There's no mercy in prison. None. It's real and it's rough. After Red Cross had taken over feeding in March 2009, and things got back to normal in there, we began a soccer league. And I was delighted to make the prison squad as a goalkeeper, giving me the privilege to walk under strict escort to play against the opposite side on a field in their compound. And during our jovial march there, singing all the way with fellow players, I asked one of the guards if I may touch my first tree in 6.5 years. When granted permission, I joyously broke formation and did so. And I clearly remember the roughness of the bark, reminding me of my granddad's farms, and the distinct smell of that jacaranda tree, which I knew so well. You have no idea how beautiful and uplifting it felt just to touch a tree and feel green grass again. My first evening at Connemara Open Prison, which is a farm prison where I was transferred after 8 years, I spent sitting around an open fire on odd logs and bleached cattle skulls, chatting with old Ndebele inmates. taking me back to what I loved so dearly as a child. Now, I remember getting lost in their interesting stories and the beauty of the sunset, the dancing flames, the tranquil call of a nightjar, and the bright stars and the moon, which I hadn't seen for 8 lonely long years. I never saw a sunset or a sunrise either for my first 8 years. Now, I appreciate the everyday little things in life, like a soft bed, a hot bath, the warm water pouring over your head in a shower, a tasty meal, a spontaneous cuddle from a loved one. Because those are the things you miss most when you have it all taken away. There are things we know that rejuvenate us. And for me, it has always been nature. I am, and will forever be, a farm boy from Zimbabwe at heart. Nature's in my blood. Touching a tree, smelling the earth, the feeling of soil in my hands. These things bring me restoration. And for you, it might be hanging out with friends, dancing, reading a good book, or swimming in the ocean. Whatever is good for you, do more of it. Despite the hell I'd gone through, physically and mentally, the worst part was knowing that my beloved children were growing up without me. I told you in the beginning that not living under the same roof as them when my wife and I separated was the hardest thing. Imagine the heartbreak I felt when I went to prison. We have always been extremely close. It is a bond I will cherish and protect to my dying day. My proud son, Dusty, only 18 at the time, was always full of ambition. And we joyously discussed and dream of making millions and plan endless projects and adventures. He was following in my footsteps and loving every minute of it, ready to take on the world with his dad, and then I was ripped away. My precious 16-year-old daughter, Sandy, and I had, and still have, an extraordinarily beautiful bond. Since the baby, she's always been my shadow. And especially as she is to me, I am to her. But at 16, I was her anchor. I was everything in her eyes. She confided in me without boundaries and clung to everything I said and did. I loved them beyond expression. They loved me. And the times they needed me most, I wasn't there. They went through first loves, crushes, dances, 21st birthdays, and entered the wide world, and I wasn't there to see it. It is a gnawing feeling knowing that I'm their father and should have been there, but I couldn't be. And I don't want anyone here ever to have to feel that way. Make enough time for your loved ones. I wish I could express the happy, bubbly, exciting, beautiful feeling I felt as I walked out those prison gates to freedom after 10 years of hell. People don't appreciate freedom. And I've realized that even when we're not in prison, there are ways in which we imprison ourselves. So our business partnerships, badly selected careers, being obsessed with money and ambition in the corporate world, even unhappy marriages. And it's only when you have your freedom completely taken away do you realize in many ways that you were actually in prison too. And when I look back on it all, it makes me wish I could somehow get through to people how precious and priceless freedom is. If you look at your life as it is, how free are you within your circumstances? Freedom is not just not being in prison. Freedom is the ability to make a choice and act on it. Freedom is letting go of what you can't control. Freedom is forgiveness. Freedom is being free from negativity. Freedom brings health. If you can be free in all areas of your life, then you'll reach your full potential. When I was released from prison, I went back into the safari business working for guys that used to work for me. It was humbling and humiliating. Having to borrow vehicles to make ends meet, conducting safaris. All my companies went broke and everything was sold. 5 safari camps, fishing resort, airplane, 11 boats, 9 vehicles. All the machinery, water plants, generators, everything was sold, all the machinery. And a big debt left behind. And I often thought, if God was really there and He helped me on death row, and I had one other encounter before, and I'll share that a little later, then how can I be in this position? I had nothing. I was desperate. And in my second day on safari, I had a group of guys from a big corporate here. And I was with the CEO on the 7th day. And he wanted to know everything about my story. So after many hours of talking and red wine, used to drink in those days, he said, I've got a new life for you, my friend. This is your calling, and I'm going to help you. He said, people need to hear the story. So I said, no, Jan, you've had too much wine, my mate. So, cut a long story short, within 6 months, he flew me to Joburg, got a PowerPoint team together, and we put a PowerPoint together, and I started talking all around the country, Hoedspruit, Nelspruit, PE, Joburg, Cape Town, all over. And then a speaking bureau heard about me, and I started talking to corporates, because they were moved by the story. And during that time, I met my beautiful wife, Sandra. And that was in October 2016. Can't get that date wrong. And Sandra was very close to the Lord and she ran all the conferences for Rhema Church. And she was very close to the Macaulay family. So I started taking my spiritual walk a lot more seriously. I wanted to change. And I wanted to know more about the encounters I had. Because I had this wall around me. And I remember I gave my life to the Lord with Pastor Ray in 2018. And I didn't open my eyes and everything was different. So I battled with that. And then in 2019, also in 2018, we rented Pastor Ray's cottage on his property. And I spent endless hours with him. And watched every Sunday, watched him, and we got to watch many generals in the spirit, like Creflo Dollar, Rick Godwin, Art Boshoff, Bert Pretorius, and a lot of other big names. And they were all fantastic, brilliant speakers. But I had built such a wall around me, and I think I just couldn't receive it. And I think it was growing up, boarding school from 6 years old, 200 k's away from home, and I lost my dad at 12. Then growing up all my teenage years during the Rhodesian Bush War on cattle ranches. And in those days it was like, cowboys don't cry, man up. And you have so much trauma that you go through and you suppress it all. You don't express any of it. And it creates triggers in you. And the only way I could deal with that was through alcohol. I became a wild teenager and one with many triggers. So when I was having a good time and someone said the wrong thing, that was it. It was explosive. And I remember on my first national rugby game, I was sent off. It was very humiliating. But I just built this block around me, and it was fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of trust. I wouldn't let anyone into my circle. I didn't trust being hurt anymore. And then in 2019, we were offered a free trip to Israel. Sandra and I, my wife and I. And I'd always wanted to go to Israel, just find out more about Jesus and learn more, about the spiritual walk. And that's the city of Capernaum where Jesus grew up, the town of Capernaum, where he started his miracles. And it's amazing when you go in there, there's all the foundations in that, and you can walk amongst them, and you just know that Jesus once walked here. It was quite an emotional thing. That's the road that Jesus carried the cross. You can't actually walk on the road, there are bars there, so you stand over it. But I remember standing there and just imagining Jesus carrying the cross like in the movie Passion of Christ. And it was very, very emotional for me, that part. That's the Garden of Gethsemane. And I remember looking at those 2,000-year-old olive trees and just wishing I could talk to them. Just tell me what you've seen, And I remember that's the tomb. On the left-hand side is where they laid Jesus to rest. And there are bars there. So I put the phone through and I took a picture. But I remember when I went in there, my hairs all stood up. It's an amazing feeling. And that where my wife is coming out is the entrance where they rolled the stone away. And then I got baptized in the River Jordan, where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And again, I didn't come up and I thought everything would be different, but it wasn't. And I battled with that. And then, the Dead Sea is something else. You can't go down. It's like a cork, just up to there. And it's 390 meters below sea level. So when you put your iPhone and you put altitude, it's minus 390 meters, and you're thinking, I hope the walls don't break here, because then we're in big trouble. But it's amazing. That's the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus walked on water. My wife in her element there. And then the Feast of Tabernacles. So there's one Feast of Tabernacles down by the Dead Sea, and the other one in Jerusalem. And the one in Jerusalem, Uncle Angus was preaching, Uncle Angus Buchan. And I'd always wanted to watch him live and meet him. And his message that year was beginnings. So he was stressing the importance of going back to the Bible and reading the Bible. And at the end of his message, he made 4,500 of us crowd the stage and vow after him that we'd read our Bibles cover to cover. So I said to my wife, I said, right, I made a vow now. I want a Bible I can understand, because I tried to read it before and it made no sense whatsoever. Probably a King James or whatever. Anyway, we got home and I got an NIV. And I started reading this, and I just loved it. This manly stuff of war and adventure, and I loved it. And I think I read it twice in 2 years. And during that time, I slowly felt the walls around me come down, and this peace that I never knew. And I still didn't. We were going to churches and everything, and still financially battling, but things were changing. And then in 2021, someone sent me a clip of a prophet in Centurion. Now, I wanted to, during those 2 years when I was reading the Bible, we went to a lot of churches, and it was all wonderful speaking, but there was nothing about what I was reading. I wanted to see it casting out demons and prophesying and praying for the sick. I wanted that stuff, and I wasn't seeing it. And that my God around me just said, no, that's not enough. And then I got this clip of this prophet, and he was doing that. He was casting out demons and prophesying and praying for the sick and people going over, and I said, yes, this is what I want. So I became a partner with him, and we were online. He was in Centurion, we were in Hout Bay. And we were with him for 1.5 years. And we never missed anything. And I remember in the beginning of 2021, I was on a men's conference in George. And I don't know what happened on that trip, but I left that place on fire for God. I got back, I was up in the morning, 5 in the morning, reading my Bible, praying in tongues. I was telling everyone about Jesus. So when you turn, when you get it, you get it. And if those of you who have properly received the Lord Jesus, then you'll know what I mean. And the problem that I had then is for 1.5 years after that, about 1 year, we still battled financially. I know it was after COVID, but I just thought, we're doing everything right. We're in love with the Lord, everything. And every time I said to my wife, so many times, I'm going back to the hunting business. I'm over this story. and then there would be a financial breakthrough and big favors, big financial, just enough to keep going. I mean, not enough even to take my wife to dinner. And then the prophet said, unless you're serving in a church and you're tithing, sowing, and you're tithing and sowing, you won't receive your full blessing. So I said, okay. And we were tithing, but we weren't serving, and we were sowing. And we had another branch in Durbanville. So we joined that branch, got his blessing, everything, joined it. And I promise you, from within a month of getting that, the doors opened unbelievably. I mean, in March last year, I spoke to over 9,600 people in 1 month. Dr. Caroline Leaf's roadshow, the Zero roadshow, there's just thousands and thousands. And on the KZN leg of Dr. Caroline Leaf's roadshow, there was a young girl came to me when I was signing books, and she said, do you want to meet Uncle Angus? So I said, I'd love to meet Uncle Angus. He said, I'm on his media team. I can arrange it for you. Can I have your phone number? So I gave it to her, and I thought, no, well, there's no chance. Within a week, we got to the huge privilege of an hour with Uncle Angus on his farm. My wife and I flew there. And we clicked like father and son. I mean, it was unbelievable. You know, he's born in Bulawayo. Not many people know that. He's a farmer, both been through tragedy, so we just chilled. I mean, we cried and laughed. It was beautiful. And I'm now one of his spiritual sons and on the Mighty Men Conference circuit as a speaker. And my life changed from that moment. And I don't do anything without praying now. And you know, I've realized because we'll pray for anything. Like before I left to come here, when we were here, I prayed in the room there. Jesus wants to share your life with you more than you share it with your wife. I'm not joking. He wants an intimate relationship with you. And once you understand that and believe that it actually works, try it. And we pray for parkings. Like, Jesus, find me a parking. And I promise you, every time there's a parking. When you can't find anything that is covered up will not be revealed, and there it is. It happens over and over. Answers our prayers time and time again. If I'm going tuna fishing out 100 k's out and it's getting rough, I just say, Jesus, please, I'm getting sick. And I promise you, it calms down. We were hunting in the Eastern Cape a while back, and I was with all these non-believers, and we were looking for kudu desperately, and it was like the second day. And I just said under my breath, I said, Jesus, please find us a kudu bull. I promise you, within 2 minutes, there was a kudu, perfect shot down. I just said, thank you, Jesus. And everyone looked at me like that. But I promise you, just if he can save a rebel like me, just pray, and he'll answer you. And I want to share another quick story of the first encounter I had. So I was like a wild teenager. That's me on this right-hand side. I left the ranch house with my uncle to go and dip cattle, 20 k's away on a ranch in West Nicholson area. And those ranches were 25,000 acres each, so they were huge chunks of land and completely undeveloped. So it was in 1979, during the height of the war. I was just 18, and 1K from the dip crawl, a troop of baboons ran across the road in front of the vehicle. And there were thousands of them back then. They were doing incredible damage, and they were vermin. So I jumped out the vehicle with my rifle, no shirt, no hat, no shoes, just like that, and took off after them, shouting to my uncle that I'd seen him at the dip crawl. About 2 hours later, I was completely lost and in a full spin. I mean, there were just mountains and mountains in every direction like that. And by 5:30 that evening, I was exhausted. I mean, I hadn't stopped all day. Starving, I hadn't eaten. We left at first light in the morning. Sunburnt like crazy, it was November. And thirsty as anything. I managed to find a dried up muddy puddle with a dead giraffe in it, and I tried to drink that. It was like drinking death. And in absolute desperation, I once again climbed up the side of one of the many mountains like that, looking for Mount Tyler, which I knew, and it'd work out where I was. And there were just mountains and mountains, with thick vegetation in between. Now, the last thing this hardcore wild rugby player would ever have considered back then was to pray. Now it was okay, I didn't need help. Only those that go to church need help. Those that need help go to church and pray. That's how it was back in those days. And I remember this feeling of hopelessness and fear. I mean, I was just a teenager, middle of the war, all alone, and there wasn't a settlement or anyone living within a 20k radius. All the ranches had been deserted from the war. And it was getting dark, and there were lion and a hyena in the area. And I got on my knees, first time in my life, and I prayed to God for help. And I'll never forget the feeling of like warm water being poured over me. And I had no idea what it was. So when it happened on death row, I knew exactly what was going on. And there's incredible calmness. And I stood up, turned around, like being guided, like something just said, just walk. And I walked down that solid granite, same way I'd come up. And where the solid granite went into the soil was long grass. And I just carried on walking, just like a zombie. Something just said, keep walking. 10 meters further, I found 2 car tire tracks. My uncle had shot a kudu there during the rains the year before. I want to tell you what a miracle that is. It's like 1 in a trillion. These are 25,000 acre ranches, very undeveloped. It's not like here. Cattle ranching. No roads or fences anywhere near where I was. And I followed those until they faded, then saw where they cut the trees to get the vehicle, carried on following. As it was getting dark, I got to the road, they were all spread out looking for me. You know, I never told anyone what happened on that mountain that day. I thought they'd laugh at me and think I was crazy or weak. That's how it was back then. But the lesson there is even if you're not a believer, like me back then, God will answer your prayers. Try it. If you can answer a rebel like me, He can answer you too. In conclusion, all right, when you go through what I endured, they crush you in every way, your confidence, your spirit, physically and emotionally. And to pick yourself up again, no matter how confident you were when you went in, is tough. Now, I had huge wounds that I thought would never heal, and a massive void in my life that I thought would never be filled. But the moment I met Sandra 9 years ago, I knew there was something very special and unique about her. Within 3 months of meeting her, 3 years of meeting her, I was healed and content once again. And I could never have imagined the peace and happiness that I now experience every day. And I want to thank you, my love. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. The company you keep influences your thinking influences your actions influence your character, and your character determines your destiny. In conclusion, I was fortunate. I'd made it big, very successful, and possibly during that time, I became a bit arrogant. But that experience has made me realize that I'm just a normal human being. That you can't value your life based on your title, your success, or your material possessions. If you had everything taken away from you right now, who would be left? What would people see looking at you as a person? We need to look at our core values more deeply, see how we can change lives and maybe make a difference in this world. There were times in there when I just felt this was the end. I didn't have the mental strength left to overcome more of those never-ending challenges. But from the bowels of despair comes this realization that just as my mind had helped drag me through those depths that far, so could it pull me out of them. Each and every one of us, when you dig deep enough, can find this inner strength to get through life's toughest times and deepest holes, out of our cages, out of the dark. Every one of you here today is faced with challenges, day in and day out. Those that you look for and those that sneak up on you from behind. But who you are and the depth of your determination is what's going to elevate you to become someone that people will look up to and forever remember. Thinking back on the events of my life, it was so hard to make sense of so much of it, but I see it so clearly now, how I've been prepared for the bigger things. Before prison, I was a big fish in little Bulawayo, going nowhere, like a hamster on a wheel going round and round. And it was all about me, my empire, money, more and more. And now, I'm a little fish in a whole wide world, making a huge difference, and it's not about me. It's about helping others and making a difference in other people's lives. I now have a purpose in life. I never had a purpose before. And the satisfaction I get from helping others far outweighs the millions I'm making before. I can now see how the Lord supernaturally drew me out of this foreign life that I loved so dearly to find my purpose. He has taken me from humble beginnings to great success, mixing with the world's elite, flying in private jets across the world, etc. Then being put through that nightmare and losing everything I'd worked my whole life for. But He has prepared me for this calling. And believe it or not, I thank God for my 10 years in prison. I do. Because I'm a better person now than I would ever have been. I don't know how to explain this, but I know 100% that God has redeemed me. And I'm a better person now than I would have been had I not gone to prison. I'm stronger. I understand people better. I know God better. And I believe it's made me able to reach out to you to tell you that God is out there. He loves you. He has a plan for you. And don't ever doubt that. Do you think that anyone can ever fully recover from a terrible setback in life? Well, you're looking at somebody that did. You're looking at living proof that you can recover from whatever life throws at you. God will answer your prayers. He'll set your feet back on the ground, and He'll offer you a beautiful life. Just put your faith in Jesus and walk with Him every day. Amen.